welcome guys. Welcome to SpiderTrack's first ever webinar. Today we are talking about safety management systems. So my name's Nick. I'm the operations manager at SpiderTrack, and I have with me today Kodey Bogart from KB Solutions LLC in Florida. How's it going today, Kodey?
Good. How are you, Nick?
Great. I'm excited. I'm excited to talk about a topic that we're both pretty passionate about. So yeah, really excited.
I always talk about like my whole thing in life is to convert people to be safety nerds like me. So I'm super excited.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you there. And just a quick bit of admin as we go through today's webinar. If everyone could please stay on mute at the end, we'll be able to do a bit of a Q&A with Kodey and hopefully answer any questions that you've got as we go along. So please jot down any questions as they crop up, and we'll have a chat about those at the end. So Kodey, let me just get this going for you. Could we please get a bit of an intro from you first, get to know who you are?
Yeah, so hello everybody. My name is Kodey Bogart, and as I just kind of previously stated, I'm a huge safety nerd. I find that people come into safety either at their own or in a forced time, and I came into it at my own, and I absolutely love it because I see there's an opportunity for a lot of growth. I am a former Army aviator. I was a medevac pilot, which included a nice little jaunt in the Middle East for a year or so. I've been...
That's a pretty safe place, right?
Well, it depends on the day, but I've been in aviation safety for almost a decade now, specifically focusing on safety. I'm a firm believer in continued education. So I have a master's in aviation safety, and I'm currently in a doctorate program at the Florida Institute of Technology, just to help further, the aviation safety throughout the globe. I really do believe in what we do to make things better. And I think there are challenges, and we'll talk about those today, where we have an opportunity to make things much simpler and easy and not such a challenge for organizations to implement safety programs. So that's a quick snip on me, but big safety
awesome.
nerd. I'm really happy to be here with everybody.
Awesome. So to kick it off, SMS, what is it? And why should we be interested in implementing them in operations?
Yeah, so obviously SMS, safety management systems. I know on social media, I'll put SMS and it takes me to some texting stuff. Totally different. It's a safety program, right, for organizations. One of my main key things when I go out to speak to my clientele it's a communication channel, and that's what I really push with SMS. It's a way for employees and management to communicate in a just way, where everybody has an opportunity or a voice at the table. I often say to a lot of my clients when I'm out talking with them that if you don't invest in risk management, right, it doesn't matter what business you're in, it's a risky business, right? And an SMS affords a shared mental model for the employees and management in an organization. I think that's super important.
Yeah, it's not just a manual, right? It's not just a piece of paper.
Yeah, no, it's me and you having a conversation effectively, and making the best out of certain scenarios that might have turned out otherwise.
Totally, yeah. So everyone's kind of probably joining today or watching this later on at a different point on their SMS journey. I'm just wondering, from your point of view, where do you think for those people who are starting out in those operations who don't have an SMS currently, where should they start?
So an SMS, the very first part is, the first pillar, first component, however you want to verbalize that, it's safety policy. And which that really means is it starts at the top of the organization. It's management's commitment to the employees and to the organization to say, hey, we want this. We're in it with you. We'll do this together. We're going to have the resources and the financial backing to make sure it's effective, and we're going to support it along that whole way. So I really think it starts with that management commitment piece, right? I might be a little bit different than other people in that I really like to lead with training, because once you start rolling out an SMS and you start to talk about it with employees, sometimes even during an analysis portion, people get apprehensive because they don't know what it is. Mm-hmm. So I like to lead with education and meet the frontline employees, and let's talk, initial SMS training, just a real quick high-level overview of what an SMS is, and then let each of those employees know, what's your role in the SMS? Like, how do you help this? Why do we need you and your input to make this effective? So I like to lead with that. Another really good indicator or thing that people can do is kind of start with a risk register. So without data, you really don't have an SMS. So that data is important. And there are a myriad of software programs and organizations that can help you capture all of those hazards on a register, whether it's a software or an Excel spreadsheet from the start. It's all something. It's all moving forward towards that goal of having a really good SMS communication program, right? It's breaking it all down into small parts, and that's kind of where I think organizations should start.
Yeah, totally. So in terms of, as you're going through implementation, what are some of the best practices that organizations can take away and use to help them get to where they want to be with SMS?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think from the onset, obviously, we've already talked about management's commitment and making sure that the organization sees that top management is definitely involved, right? So, but from there, you can move on to establishing clear goals for the organization. I don't know if you've ever used a Gantt chart, but they're really good for establishing objectives and timelines in a measurable manner. So you're not trying to tackle everything all at once. It's not this laborious monster that sits on your back. It is, I'm going to work this piece today, and this piece is going to help me prep for tomorrow, which is going to help me prep for down the road. And that involves, all employees at all levels within the organization to make them, as I mentioned earlier, know that they're part of that SMS and that they have an involvement in it and that they're really, really, really needed for that. Mm-hmm. Obviously, I know we're going to talk probably further down the road about just culture, but establishing that just culture where everybody knows it's a communication tool where we work together to make things safer for your organization, for the employees to go home to their families every night, right? So starting with that just culture is very paramount.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, definitely. Keeping the conversation going right in there and making sure everyone's on board.
Yeah, and make sure they have an understanding of it, because if you start something and people don't know what they're supposed to do with it, then they're just kind of holding it in their hands. Like, where do I go? So giving them a foundation to move forward with is really important. Yeah,
absolutely. So challenges, there's plenty of them, especially when you're kicking off at the very beginning. But what do you think some of the key challenges that operators tend to come across first?
So an SMS really depends on size and complexity of the organization. A larger organization is going to need more financial backing and resources to make it effective. But it's also really a challenge for smaller organizations. Yes, funding and resources, if you will, might be available. But if it's a 2 to 3 person shop, things become challenging about communication, right? Do I want to self-report on me? Like, what does that look like? I always know who this is. Do I want to tell on my friend? So those can be some challenges, but it really does start with the organization at the top, committing the resources, committing to a safety program, and then following it, right? We'd already mentioned training with the employees. I think some challenges are making sure that you bring everybody along on that journey together. Within SMS, there is a section on management of change, but I really like to harp on change management, because you're going to have employees who don't like change, right? We're human. We like to be in our bubble and we like to stay still and we don't want to mess things up, right? So involve your employees. If there's some strength that they have that you think can help your SMS, involve them, bring them on that journey and let them know that they're part of it, and very important. I also think it's really important to set expectations, because if you don't know what to expect from something, it's hard to move in that direction. So set manageable goals, manageable expectations, and then realize that, and you'll hear me probably say it a plethora of times during this, but it is a journey. Like, we start today, we don't have an S tomorrow. We're on that phase, on that journey towards that continuous improvement piece, which lasts literally for the duration of the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. So particularly for the small organizations out there that see SMS as a big scary beast and potentially a real burden to get started, do you think that absolutely. Some of those elements, breaking it down, should be the really the best approaches to just kicking it off and just getting it going.
Yeah, definitely. Start small. Make delineated steps forward. If you try to tackle this big beast by itself, and it becomes overwhelming, and then people want to shut down or don't want to partake in it anymore. If you just do small steps, small goals, small expectations, and move forward with that, you're going to have a lot less stress moving forward, and it's going to be manageable, where the organization could then honestly start to make good risk-based decision making.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of mistakes, what are some of the common mistakes that you see organizations making when they're approaching this, maybe for the first time, or maybe they have one established and they're continuing through along this SMS journey?
Yeah, so we kind of mentioned it just a little bit already, but tackling every step or element at the same time, like it's too much. It's too much at once. Start small. And when an organization goes through a gap analysis to say, hey, this is where you are, because a lot of companies have so many safety programs already established that when you really think about it in an SMS layout, you might not have a whole lot to tackle. You're probably already doing the majority of what you should be doing. We just need to define those processes, document them, and make sure we're following a clear path, right? Yeah. So starting small with an understanding of, I'm going to tackle this first, and then we're going to move here, and we're going to move there. And I think that really, really helps, because it can feel overwhelming. A second part of that, would be getting the buy-in from the team. Like, it's not just management. I mean, they're going to lead it, but it's everybody who needs to be part of it, because if you don't have employees reporting hazards, then without data, you don't really have an SMS. So you need those frontline employees to highlight those latent conditions to make that meaningful information into the SMS. I've worked with some companies before who had a really strong blame culture. And it's important for top management to move back a little bit and go to a just culture, and maybe not go into blaming the people or the employee, right, of something, but say, hey, why did this employee do this way? What did we as an organization maybe not provide them? Did we give them the right tools to be successful at that job, right? And so that's part of moving from a blame culture to that just culture. And I think all of those things are common mistakes that can slow the progress of an SMS from the onset.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, it's a really common problem, right? And so easy to jump to blaming people for their mistakes, but it's a really key example of how SMS is making a systematic approach to understanding what actually contributed and how we can actually deal with those things, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's ingrained in us too. I teach an aviation safety class at the college, and I teach the history of safety. And it's literally ingrained in us from the late 1800s in the industrial days, to blame people and to not support them. But that's not the way that we make our organization better. We support our employees. And so that's a strong movement forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So moving on to one of the actual points of the SMS, or one of the key parts, is measuring the effectiveness of the SMS itself. So what are some of the ways that organizations can effectively measure the SMS?
Yeah, so when you look at ICAO or FAA or whatever your regulatory authority is, they're going to talk about safety performance indicators and safety performance targets. Now, as a generic example, one of those targets could be, I want to increase safety reporting, 30%, 20% over previous year. Right. So having those goals and targets in mind allow you to get indicators to say, I'm 3 months in towards that goal. So let me look at it. Am I on track to meet that goal? Right. And that helps you measure the effectiveness. Right. Look at the number of safety events that you have in your organization. Are they increasing or are they decreasing? Those are really good indicators as well. Again, I harp so much on the meat and potatoes, as I call it, of safety risk management. And that is the number of safety reports I get from my employees, right? If nobody's reporting anything, I know they're seeing things. I know that there's stuff going on. I know that there is work is done versus work as imagined, right? Maybe as a management might think things are happening a certain way, but I know the employees are doing workarounds to get the job done. And they need to report those things so we can mitigate them and make them work better, right? So it depends on how many safety reports the organization might also see.
Yeah.
Another really good piece for that measurement of effectiveness, and nobody likes to get audited. So we don't want to be told that we're not doing something right, that we think we're doing right, or maybe we know we're not doing it as right as we should be. But I tell you, I love audits. I go into audits really excited when there's findings, because it's an opportunity for me to say, yes, I have continuous improvement. I'm not perfect, right? And I have an opportunity to correct something that maybe I didn't see before. So those are really good opportunities to measure an organization's effectiveness of their safety program.
Perfect. And probably quite relevant to the previous topic, but there's a role of technology to play somewhere in all of this, right? And so I'm wondering from your perspective where you see that role of technology, and how can technology really positively impact both implementation and the final product of the SMS?
Yeah, absolutely. So, technology is so neat. It is consistently changing. We're in that Internet of Things where everything talks and communicates together. So it's in its rapid growth things. Sometimes I personally feel like I'm trying to keep, do catch up, and my kids are really good at like, hey, mom, this is how things are supposed to happen.
You're not the only one. I think we're all there.
But, technology is a very useful tool to help us capture and aggregate data so we can make meaningful decisions, right? So there is a myriad of software programs out there that can be used, let alone for flight data monitoring. But when you talk about FOQA, when you talk about ASAP, there's all this data capture stuff that's happening out there, right? When you look at spider tracks on the dashboard that your organization provides, there are some really great insights where organizations can set parameters to alert them of things that are going on. And that's great. So if you have like increased rates of dissent, more than you've established a parameter for, it's an opportunity for the organization to go in and be like, why are we having these increased rates of dissent? Do we need to train personnel? Do we need to talk more about this? Or is there something going on with the airframe that we're not aware of? It's a really good opportunity, right, to get better via those insights provided through technology. Right. And it really lets you see how your organization is functioning now, as opposed to being reactive, right? So that data that you can get in enables you to be proactive and say, hey, this is what's happening right now. We need to address this so we don't have an issue down the road to help your employees.
Yeah, absolutely. It's additional data at the end of the day, right? Additional data that you can draw from. You can investigate trends in, and hopefully allow you to action something from.
Yeah, and we're talking about technology. It's super important, right? But it is just one part of that equation. It's still important to have the right processes to get to that point, and the right culture in place to help foster that growth, to get to that proactive environment. But
absolutely. Yeah. And at the end of the day, the technology is just an enabler. It helps the system, but in and of itself, it can't do anything. So we really need the people in the organization to be actioning what comes out of the technology.
Yeah, and I find with a lot of organizations that there's a lot of people who, right, so there's a lot of good programs out there that help capture that data for us in different facets, if it's from the airframe or from internal hazard reporting, but being able to understand what that data means, interpreting it, and then making the proper mitigations to get to that proactive nature just are super, super important. And technology helps us get better at that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Certainly from our perspective here at SpiderTracks, that's what we're trying to do with our flight safety insights. But as I said, someone's got to do something with it at the end of the day. So moving on from technology, let's talk a bit more about continuous improvement. So staying up to date, how can organizations ensure their SMS is staying up to date?
Yeah, so we had briefly touched on it previously, but I think audits are super important. And I know there's this apprehension about someone coming in and telling you, hey, XYZ is not working perfectly for you, but they really are important. Conducting those regular interviews with your employees, conducting assessments, they help you identify areas for you to continuously improve, right? It doesn't mean tomorrow you're good because you fixed, whatever that point was, but it allows you to see, hey, maybe I haven't been doing things the best way. And it gives you an altered perspective. And an opportunity is to, sit on webinars, just like what we're doing today, to allow to see things that are happening in the industry, right? Staying up with the trends, going to events, attending classes. All of those things are really important, because I guarantee if your organization is feeling something in your bubble, that there's another organization out there that's experiencing the same thing as you, or has experienced it before, that can help you get through that successfully, right? So it's like, you're not alone in this. We're all going through it, and we're all trying to get better. And that allows a shared mental model across the industry. There are great things out there, the ASARS programs or ASAP programs, or organizations who fly a certain type of operation, or a certain type of aircraft, and they can go in and pull reports just on those parameters and say, hey, what's going on over there? Maybe I am experiencing it, or maybe I'm not. But if I'm not, maybe I will. And I could, learn from those organizations, so I don't have those certain challenges down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking about staying up to date, particularly topical area right now, particularly in the US, talking about SMS regulations. So there are obviously currently SMS regulations and mandates in some countries, mandated by the aviation authorities in those regions. Currently no mandates for Part 135, at least in the US yet, but that's coming, right?
Yeah, so I'm, again, super safety geek nerd, very excited about this. Those organizations might not be, and that's just because it's change. But I think once they see the benefits of it, which there are a myriad of those, then they'll start to understand why it's important. It's yes, the notice of proposed rulemaking did come out. Unfortunately, like repair stations aren't in there, like 145s. To an extent. I think there's still a lot of growth and opportunity in the maintenance sector and in the unmanned sector when it comes to SMS requirements. I'm a huge fan of EASA, because they are very specific on their requirements for what they need for an SMS program. Australia is really good. New Zealand's also very good. Transport Canada, again, for major airlines, but they don't have them for the smaller organizations. So I'm really excited to see how this establishment goes for 135 organizations. If I could just say one thing to any of those operators, it's like, yes, it's just another regulation that we have to follow, but I think it's one that the organization in time will really see was very much for their benefit. They're going to come out on the other side.
Yeah, I think the point you made earlier about everyone getting home to their families safe at night, this is absolutely what it's aimed at. At the end of the day, that's what we want.
Yeah, and I know the FAA is going to be inundated with things when this first starts to kick off, but from the reps I've spoken with at the FAA, they're also excited about it and eager to see how it goes. And I think it's going to be a journey, right? That's SMS. It's a journey, and they're on that journey with us, right? So we're in it together. Yeah,
totally. Now you did touch on this a little bit there, but we just want to talk through the benefits, right? Like if regulators are going to push operators in a certain direction, they need to understand there's actually really a lot of benefits for them. So from your point of view, Kodey, what are some of the key benefits that SMS can contribute?
So like, again, when I speak with organizations, it's really important that I harp on an SMS as a communication tool for the organization to get better. And because of that communication tool, you have a strengthened safety culture. The organization will have a better understanding of what the employees are going through, what's coming up with their products and the services that they provide their customers. right? Early hazard detection, right? So we're no longer reactive, but we can be predictive and proactive in where things are going.
Yep.
Management can make safety driven decisions, which is super important, right? It helps them out a lot. It puts safety as a priority, right? Safety culture is at the forefront of the organization. It can identify challenges in the organization, maybe with some certain efficiencies, so you can look to improve those, so you can streamline how your operation works. With that, you're going to gain some, return on that investment. You're going to have some cost avoidance. If your employees are not getting injured at work, not having to work through workman's comp issues, not having time away from work because someone might be home with some sort of issue, all of those things help save money, for the organization. So there's so many benefits, but again, my most favorite is the communication side.
Yeah.
I can talk, if I do something not in line with what should be done, if I'm flying my helicopter and I motion a switch that I shouldn't motion, I should be able to report on myself. Or if I'm flying with another pilot, then I should be able to report on them or them on me without feeling any, reprisal or some sort of blame side of that. It's an opportunity for the organization to communicate. And that's to me the most important part that benefits the organization, is everybody understands everything that's going on collectively.
Yeah, absolutely. And closing the feedback loop, I would say as well, just, again, it's part of that communication piece, but employees understanding that if they do raise something happens, and then they hear about it and everyone else hears about it, and it just that loop, that communication permeates through the organization, creating that culture, that safety culture that you want, right?
Yeah, feedback is definitely important, because if your employees are reporting things and they're not hearing anything back from the management on, what they have done to help mitigate things, then they're probably going to not report things moving forward. So that feedback loop is definitely important.
Awesome. Lastly, before we kick off into the Q&A, I just want to know your top advice for organizations if they're just about to get into building up and implementing their own SMS. What would you say to them?
So I know we've touched this on a little bit, right? And an SMS can be challenging to implement. You're going to have employees who are super ramped about it, and you're going to have employees who are hesitant about it. But all I can say is it's worth it.
Yeah.
In the long run, it's going to help every employee. It's going to help management. It's going to help the organization as a whole be successful, which makes everybody part of that organization successful as well. By taking thoughtful step-by-step approaches and involving employees at all levels of the organization, right? It creates a safer, more efficient operation.
Yeah.
My big thing is, again, start small. You don't have to eat the whole cake, even though we want to. Just have a slice at a time and get through that. And it is a journey. There's continuous improvement built into it because it never stops. You'll always be a part of it. So those are my key takeaways. Embrace it, and then realize that it is a journey that's going to take you pretty far.
Yeah. Perfect. Did you have any examples of a particularly successful SMS that you've been involved with in your time in the aviation safety space?
Yeah, so I mentioned kind of at the very beginning of when we started to talking that I personally like to lead with training. So if you want, we could talk about processing and manuals, and not everybody needs to see that right away while those are in development, but I really like to get in with the employees and just start educating them on SMS. So that way, when they start to see things, or they see a manual or a safety policy or just culture policies or whatever is written and done and starting to be implemented within the organization, they have an understanding of what that is.
Yeah.
They have an expectation of like, oh, I remember hearing about that. Oh yeah, safety policy, that's the first component of an SMS. Or, oh, hazard analysis, I know what a hazard is. Yeah. I know that a risk is severity and likelihood. It gives them an opportunity to say, I have an expectation. I know what's moving forward, and I know why they're doing this. And so I like to lead with educating your employees on an SMS and what that really means for them.
Cool. Awesome. Well, that wraps up the main questions that I wanted to ask you today, Kodey, but we want to open the floor a bit to everyone else on the call, and hopefully we can answer any questions that anyone else might have that have hopefully cropped up during today's webinar. So if you do have any questions, just feel free to unmute yourself and ask away.
Hey, thanks, guys. Super useful, super interesting. I guess question I've got is, if I'm a safety manager or someone else anywhere in the organization that doesn't hold a senior position and a decision-making position, and we're in an environment where implementing an SMS is discretionary, how do I best pitch that to my senior management, my decision makers, from an investment standpoint? So someone who's sitting there watching the purse strings, and I'm saying, I need and want you to invest in something that you don't necessarily need to do. What's the return on that investment, and what's the best way to pitch that type of concept in an environment like that?
Yeah, Dave, that's a great question. If there's an opportunity to do some sort of cost benefit analysis, maybe look at historical records of events or incidents that have occurred in the organization and said, hey, this is what this had cost us. And we had an opportunity to be proactive with it by putting mitigations in place sooner. So we could have saved X, Y, and Z. And sometimes it might not be examples from your own organization. You might have to look at an organization that's similar to you that has had an event, right? That you can capture what that looks like to turn that in. You know, when you're in safety, it is a sales system, right? Because you're trying to get people on board with the idea of safety. And sometimes people are hesitant. I think just being able to show real value from previous events, either within or external to the organization, can really drive that point home.
It'd be pretty uphill. It can be a pretty uphill battle in some situations, for sure. I think that's a really good point, Kodey. And just seeking the data, finding the data, and presenting it, because there's a hell of a lot of data out there on this sort of stuff as well. You know.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's tons of organizations, you know, or methods, right? So the ASAP program, ASARs, things like that, Air Charter Safety Foundation or NBAA or HAI, all these organizations do capture data that you can pull in and relate that back to your management to say, hey, these are occurrences that have happened in companies similar to ours. So let's not do what they've done. Let's be more proactive against those things. But I hope that answered your question, Dave.
So again, data, right? Having that data to understand what some historical costs might have been, or benchmarking at least across the industry. Yeah.
I would also.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, sorry, Kodey. I would also say, and just tack on to the end of that, is that if we just look at the FAA and the US situation approaching a potential mandate here, they're not the first to do it. A lot of countries have been ahead of them with this. And so there's actually a lot of information, a lot of data on very successful SMS implementations from overseas. So if organizations are looking to find use cases to present to leadership in those situations, I definitely say look overseas and even just talk to overseas operators about these sorts of things, because you know, no one's done it. No one's the first to have done it, and there's plenty of information and experience out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool, thank you.
Are there any other questions, guys?
Okay, I have another one.
Let's go, Dave.
Kodey, I'm interested in your experience on, obviously, you know, your aviation business, you have operations on the ground, and you have your critical operations in the sky. Do you typically, or how often do you see, or what proportion of reporting and incident reporting and tickets that get raised around the shop floor and around the office is actually coming from flight operations and FOQA type data, and how might you even measure that, or is there a way that you'd measure the effectiveness of that, of how well my SMS is working based on the proportion of where those things are coming from, maybe. So, sorry, that makes sense, the question?
It does. It's a good question. So my background, right, I come from the helicopter industry. I've been doing that for nearly 20 years. I think that the rotor industry is a bit behind from the fixed wing as far as people actually reporting, right, saying things. It's easy to talk about the stuff that's on the shop floor, but if I'm a 135 operator, if I'm a single pilot, that means I have to tell on myself. And those things can hurt our egos, and they become a challenge. I think there is a growth piece when it comes to SMS and reporting. It's going to start in a bubble somewhere, and maybe it is the shop floor, or maybe it's from your human resources department who is tired of tripping on the same cable all the time. I don't know. But once those bubbles start and people see how management react to that, so they can see that, hey, they're not just a blame culture pointing fingers and letting people go, for example, but they're actually saying, hey, man, we own some of that. We can help you be better. I think once you see those pockets and bubbles grow, then it starts to pollinate across the whole organization and really be woven into the fabric of it. I think it does, it starts more at the interpersonal level. I'd say a higher percentage comes from ground events initially than it does from flight events. But I think once they see how that grows, that there's more of an opportunity to help the other section grow as well as from the in-flight activities.
Interesting. No, thanks for that. And that makes sense, I guess, right? If someone's going to get their head chopped off for relocating the printer in the office, they're unlikely to report something in the aircraft, are they? So, yeah. Cool. Thank you.
All right, so if there are no further questions from anyone on today's webinar, I just want to tie up the end of the webinar with just raising a few of these resources that I've got on the screen here. So like we said there's a lot of data, a lot of information out there. Kodey here is an aviation safety expert, and she's absolutely available to help organizations if they're on their journeys. So her website's up there, KB Solutions. ICAO has some great resources. Kodey made the point to me yesterday that ICAO doesn't mandate anything and no one has to follow what they set out, but they have some great resources, particularly on SMS, that I've used personally in the past. And so I highly recommend looking into ICAO's safety website there. But of course, FAA has their own resources. And then, of course, we have at SpiderTrax a product which we see tying in particularly well into SMS. So if you're interested in finding out more about that, go ahead, join us on our mission for safety. So today, guys, thank you very much for joining us. We've had a ball, and from my perspective, I'm thrilled to be able to share our mission for safety and our interest in SMS and pushing that along with you today, as I'm sure Kodey is. So thank you.
Yeah, and Nicholas, this is being recorded, right? So it's going to be put out on the SpiderTrax website.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so we'll be sharing that later in a trimmed up version with just a bit of light editing, and so we'll make sure that's available to everyone after the fact.
Yeah, good. I'm quite grateful. I can see all the names of everybody who's joined it, and a number of them are quite familiar to me. So I'm really glad to see people being proactive and getting out there and listening to see what's occurring in the industry. And I'm grateful that they've listened to us and chimed with us. Really looking forward to the next one, because we can only grow from here.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you very much, guys. Enjoy the rest of your days wherever you are, and we'll see you again soon.
SpiderTrax. Simple flight data today for a safer tomorrow.